Hi there. This lesson is a review on using properties of equality to solve one-step equations that you learned in the past. So as you can see on the left-hand side, I have all of the properties written out. So at any time during this video, you need to copy those down. We're going to go ahead and start with examples. And the first example is going to be using the addition property of equality to solve. So the first example is x minus 1.8. I'm going to make this bigger. Is equal to 7.4. So we are going to choose the addition property because we already have the minus sign here, and that's subtraction, and addition and subtraction are inverse operations. So we're going to go ahead and add 1.8 to both sides. Now I drew my line there because that's like a balanced scale, so whatever I do to one side of the scale, I have to do to the other side of the scale, and that's what the properties of equality say. So now I'm going to drop this x down below my line because there wasn't anything underneath it. And then I have a minus 1.8 and a plus 1.8. Those are inverse operations that add to 0. And then on the other side, I would go ahead and add 7.4 and 1.8, and I get 9.2. So as you can see, x plus 0, the plus 0 doesn't do anything, so my answer is x equals 9.2. And then I have another box over here that says check. So all I'm going to do is plug 9.2 in for the x in my original problem and make sure that it really does work. So 9.2 is my x minus 1.8, and does that really equal 7.4? So I would do 9.2 minus 1.8, we get 7.4. And I don't mind if you use a calculator to check your work, but you should not use a calculator to do the work. Alright, let's go ahead and move on to another example. This next example is the subtraction property of equality. And if I start with the problem x plus 4/9 is equal to 7/8. I know that I'm going to have my line here to represent the balanced scale. And if I want to isolate the x, which means get x by itself, I need to take away 4/9 from both sides. So I need to take away 4/9 from both sides. So I drop down my x. A plus 4/9 minus 4/9 adds to 0. But then we need to remember that in order to add or subtract fractions, we need a common denominator. So the common denominator between 8 and 9 is 72. So that means I need to multiply the top fraction by 9 over 9 and the bottom fraction by 8 over 8. So on the top one, I get 63 over 72. And on the bottom one, I get minus 32 over 72. So once I have the common denominator, all I have to do is subtract 63 minus 32, and that equals 31. And the denominator stays the same, 72. So that gives me my answer, x equals 31 over 72. And then over in the right-hand box, we're going to check our work. So we're going to ask ourselves, does 31 over 72 plus 4 over 9 really equal 7/8. So let's get a common denominator of 72, so that's 31 over 72, plus, and I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 8 to get a common denominator, so that's 32 over 72. And then over here I'm going to multiply by 9 over 9, and I get 63 over 72. So if I add the numerators over here, I get 63, and that's over 72. So yes, it did work out. So that means that 31 over 72 is my answer. Moving on to the next example, I have x divided by 5 is equal to 10. So we're going to draw our line for our balanced scale. And the inverse operation of division, notice I read this as x divided by 5. The inverse operation is multiplication. So both sides are going to be multiplied by 5. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. That's what the multiplication property of equality says. 5 over 5 will simplify to 1. So I get 1x on the left, and I get 50 on the right. Well, 1x is the same as x, so x equals 50 is my answer. And this is an easy check. When I plug 50 in for x, I get 50 divided by 5 equals 10, and of course, that does work. So we are done with that problem. And the last property of equality that we have is the division property. And that says that we can divide both sides by the same number to get an equivalent statement. So we're going to start with 7x is equal to 126. And I'm going to draw my balanced scale there. Now this time, make sure you realize that when a number is next to a variable, it means multiplication. So the inverse operation of multiplication is division, so I'm going to divide both sides by 7. And when I do that, 7 divided by 7 is 1. So I get 1x. And then I would do 126 divided by 7, and the result is 18. So 1x is the same as x, so that means x equals 18 is the answer. I'm ready to plug that in. So my original problem was 7x equals 126. So I'm going to plug in 18 for x. Again, make sure you realize 7 is being multiplied by whatever x is. So 7 times 18 should give us 126, and it actually does, so that means that 18 was the right answer. So the check is, you can use your calculator, it's just to make sure that we didn't make any mistakes in our work. So we are just going to finish off this video with the key concept, and that is that we can use inverse operations to isolate the variable. And isolate means get by itself. Also, the most important part of knowing what properties of equality are, that means that whatever we do to one side of an equation, we must do that same thing to the other side. And that is the notes for properties of equality.